Joe Biden is choosing now to say that he thinks that he would actually be the best president to follow Barack Obama. Let's listen.
No regrets? I know that before you said that you didn't run, but you knew that it was the right decision for your family. But
look, I had planned on running. It's an awful thing to say. I think I would have been the best president, but it was the right thing, not just for my family, for me. No one should ever seek the presidency unless they're able to devote their whole heart and soul and passion into just doing that. And Beau was my soul. I just wasn't ready to be able to do that. Now, my one regret is my Beau's not here. I don't have any other regrets.
That's extremely sad.
Yes. So every time Joe Biden talks about his son passing away, I nearly tear up. And when he calls him my Beau, I'm like, oh man, hold it back, right? And so if you've never seen it, Joe Biden had this amazing speech he gave to veterans. This is before Beau Biden passed away, because he talked about his loss, because if you don't know, he originally lost one of his kids and his wife in a tragic accident decades ago, right, when he'd first become a senator. So he'd already felt that terrible tragedy. Then he loses his adult son to cancer. So that's why they're doing the cancer moonshot, which, I mean, we all, no matter what you are politically, hope that it works, obviously, because we all get cancer, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, right? And so it's wonderful that he's doing that. Now let's talk about the political stuff that he said there, and I've got some very clear conclusions on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do at least 2 gavels here. First gavel.
2 gavels.
Would Joe Biden have won the presidency? No. Okay.
If everybody else who was running was running.
Yes.
No.
Now, people always talk about like, oh, Joe Biden, maybe. No, there's no maybe, okay? So first, Joe is not an electrifying campaigner. And
he's fun.
Yeah, but he makes a ton of gaffes, and it's deeply problematic, right? I've seen it 1,000 times.
He's got a bit of that Trump thing, though, where his gaffes don't stick to him the same way they do to other politicians.
Yeah, but neither do the voters. Okay, so here's...
Just bounce off.
Yeah, here's my pretty overwhelming evidence that I don't know why nobody talked about it when they were like, is Biden going to run? Is Biden going to run? I don't know if you know this, Biden already ran against Hillary Clinton in 2008.
Yeah.
They both lost to Obama, but it's not like Biden just lost to Obama. No, Hillary Clinton cleaned his clock.
I mean, technically, I think that you have to expect that any relatively young vice president is going to pursue the presidency. I think that that's what fueled a lot of that. And it's amazing that he was considered not just a less attractive candidate than Hillary Clinton to a lot of the establishment types, but less high profile, basically, despite the fact that he was the vice president.
Yeah, that
he
is
could
kind of
become
amazing.
president
Yeah.
any given day, but
Yes.
it didn't really matter. And look, I have to say that when people were talking about him early on, Joe Biden seems like a nice guy. I can tell you almost nothing about him that's distinct from other Democrats, and not really to any fault to it. He doesn't project this is the thing that drives me. And now he's got the cancer thing. Obviously, makes total sense, all the sense in the world. But it's not like I can tell you what he's been fighting for his whole career and list his policy differences with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
So I know that a tiny bit better because I've been following him for decades that I've been covering politics. And he tends to be a tiny bit more progressive than your average Democrat, partly because he grew up in a time, politically, when Democrats were more progressive. So they cared more about all the different issues. Healthcare, he's actually great on women's rights issues, has been a good champion of that for a long, long time. But, you know, as with the rest of the Democratic Party, he has been corrupted a little bit to a lot by the corporate influence of all the donors. So I would have put him somewhere between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
Or Martin O'Malley, maybe.
Right, but definitely closer to Hillary Clinton than to Bernie Sanders. So then if you're outflanked on both sides, Bernie's way to the left of you and Hillary's more establishment than you, you really don't have anywhere to go. Yeah. So given his prior experience as a lackluster candidate, and given that he was outflanked on both sides, he wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't need to shed a tear for Joe on that. And we've shed, I personally, literally watching that speech they gave to the veterans, I shed many tears.
Yeah, right? And look, he can do that. He's not an electrifying campaigner, I agree. I remember some of the debates and all that. But even right in the clip that we just showed you, when he was talking about why he thinks that nobody should be in it unless they have their whole heart that they can put into it and all that, like there's more. I'm not saying that he's not to some extent hiding political calculations, which also went into him not running, which I'm sure that was a small part of it. But it was more emotional, more raw, and in some ways more honest than everything Donald Trump has ever said put together into one ball. And it takes him 2 seconds to achieve something Donald Trump will never achieve in his life. And the speech that you're referring to there is a more extended version of that. And so that's an advantage that he has over some politicians, at least.
Well, so he's super real in that sense. And he's always been like the average guy. He went back and forth between Delaware and Washington because on the Amtrak, right? Because that he commuted all the time.
Now he uses one of those hoverboards, so they're not safe. Don't use them.
So, and he's not rich. He's one of the few politicians in Washington who's not rich. He started in politics when he was really young and never went out and became a lobbyist.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really, real guy feel to Joe Biden, and a lot of it is true. Now, again, having said all that, he's been part of this democratic system and establishment for a long time. So there's no savior thing to Uncle Joe. And Uncle Joe is like the guy who comes over for Thanksgiving and he says one or two inappropriate things, but that's because he's, a little older than everybody. And you say, Uncle Joe, you don't say colored anymore, or whatever it is, right? And
He didn't say colored.
He didn't say that.
He didn't say it.
Although he did talk about the Indians at 7-Eleven and stuff, right? But he's a lovable guy. Uncle Joe means well, right? When Uncle Don comes over, you're like, hide your teenage daughters because he's going to hug them too hard.
You have to hide his teenage daughters.
Do you see what I'm saying? They're both inappropriate uncles in totally different ways. One means really well. The other one's a little possibly monstrous.
Yeah.
Right? So referring to Donald Trump, of course. But I do have one more gavel for you guys.
You know what it is.
Okay. So is he guilty for saying I would have been the best president? Because now wait a minute, now you're getting in Hillary Clinton's grill. What's the point for that? Right now, she's in the middle of running. Don't do that.
Right now?
No, not guilty. Of course everybody thinks they would have been the best president. I think I'd be the best president. Right? So a guy who's the vice president.
Put you a little bit below Biden.
Right. And has been in politics his whole life. He's allowed to think that he would have been the best president.
Yeah, it is it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that he's come out and actually endorsed Hillary Clinton, but he seems to have accepted that that's the way the party's going. As you say, he's an establishment guy for a very long time. She's cozied up to their administration, not necessarily him specifically, but the administration for quite a while now, always ready to throw Barack Obama under that Wall Street donations bus. But at the same time, him saying that now, what that made me think of is what you had been talking about, the scuttlebutt in D.C., that if she were to be indicted and if she were to go down, then all of a sudden, maybe not Bernie, maybe Biden. So maybe he's Biden this time.
Yeah, and so it is a weird thing.
Which he must have heard of, by the way.
Of course. It is a weird thing for him to say at this juncture.
Mm-hmm.
So while I declare him not guilty for thinking that, he's not unsavvy about politics, and so strange timing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then people keep saying like, "Hey, Cenk, this whole talk about Hillary Clinton getting indicted is ridiculous because if she was going to get indicted, they would put Biden out there." Well, you just saw Biden out there telling you he'd be the best president. So when Paul Ryan did his machinations when it looked like there was going to be a contested convention and kept saying, "Oh no, I do declare, I would never, I would never," right? So now you have Biden going, "Well, I would, and that'd be awesome." So interesting.
That's an interesting development. Look, I like Biden. I've always liked Biden. I feel bad for him, especially the family trauma. I've lost people in my family. But if Hillary goes down and he jumps in front of Bernie, the burners send their regards.
Yeah.
Sorry, got to take you down, Uncle Biden.
Yeah. No. Okay. Now let's keep it real. I mean, if they tried something like that at the convention, no. I mean, if you thought the Republican convention was going to be contested, believe me, the Democratic convention would be heavily contested, and a lot of people would be sending their regards. And there's no way. Like they would split the party right down the middle if they did that, because that would be such an obnoxious, unacceptable move that you know, that a lot of people who would have voted for whoever the Democratic nominee was would be like, hell no, under no circumstances.
Definitely.